Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and foremost ladies. I would like to convey to you some formal words of welcome on behalf of Nieuwspoort International Press Center here. My name is Jan van Kroeze. I'm a former president of Nieuwspoort International Press Center and a long-time international journalist. And as such, I was invited 6 or 7 years ago to come over to Kiev in order to hold some lectures there about independence of journalism and freedom of the press. And obviously in Kiev, one has not forgotten my name, because only 8 days ago I was approached by somebody from your delegation and asking me whether I could arrange a meeting in short term on the 22nd today at Nieuwspoort International Press Center. We have tried our utmost and we are here, but unfortunately we have not succeeded in getting a lot of Dutch journalists here, and there's only one main reason for that. You know what happened in Brussels today, because you came from Brussels and you were very near the attacks at the Zaventem International Airport of Brussels. And it's a hectic situation now, and journalists who had assured us that they would be here were recalled to their desk or were recalled to go to Brussels in order to cover everything what's going on there, because it's a hectic situation not only in Belgium but also here in the Netherlands, because we have special meetings. We've had special meetings of the Dutch government today, a special declaration from the Prime Minister in Parliament and so on. So journalists are not available at this moment for this meeting, but I hope that the meeting will be fruitful. So again, welcome at Nieuwspoort International Press Center, and I hope you will have a fruitful and pleasant stay here in the Netherlands.
Thank you so much. My name is Alona Shkrum. I'm an MP of Ukrainian Parliament from the fraction of Party Batkivshina. I'm one of the new MPs of this Parliament, and I would like to present our delegation here. We have my colleague MP Olena Sotnik from fraction Samopomich. We have a number of new activists, members of the civil society, which is very vibrant and very, very healthy right now in Ukraine. Let me also start with expressing our deep condolences to all the horrible situations that happened in Brussels, to all the victims of this horrible and tragic terrorist attacks. We just came back from Brussels indeed. We have been in the Brussels airport just a number of minutes after the attack took place. And unfortunately, Ukrainians know very well the tragic repercussions and the sorrows of terrorist attacks. So let us express our condolences here. Ukraine is quite a new country, and we have just started our way to our real independence and our political freedoms, freedoms of speech and freedoms of economy. Our parliament has renewed for more than 53%, and a lot of young people you will see right now in the parliament who never had a chance to go to the parliament before that. Maidan brought all of those people, all the vibrant representatives of civil society, new activists, new journalists who are fighting for real reforms in Ukraine. And we have come here today before the referendum in the Netherlands concerning the association agreement with Ukraine. I would like to start off telling why this association agreement is important for us, and what it is and what it is not. And my colleagues will hopefully develop on specific issues of this EU association agreement. Well, first of all, to be very, very clear, it is an economic part of the association agreement. It is not an agreement for Ukraine to be a member of the EU. It is a trade agreement, and it is a total manipulation to say that Ukraine will become a member of the EU in the relatively soon time. So this agreement is a win-win agreement for European Union, for any country who is a member of the European Union, and for Ukraine, because it will lead, like any trade agreement, to open competition. It will lead for Holland and for the Netherlands to lower prices, to more market, to more jobs, and to more trade. And this is the main purpose of this agreement, to be very, very clear and specific. This is not an agreement for Ukraine to gain more financial support from the EU. EU is supporting Ukraine in many ways, supporting the reforms, supporting the political and economic freedoms, but this agreement doesn't go there. We are already receiving financial support, which has nothing to do with this part of the agreement, which is mainly a trade and economic policy agreement. It is also not an agreement to allow workers from Ukraine or migrants from Ukraine to gain jobs here in the Netherlands or in any part of the EU, because this agreement will only benefit the companies and will only benefit our tourists, which would be allowed to come here, which are already coming here. Again, this agreement is not an agreement for Ukraine to join NATO. We know that this has been a big manipulation about that, but again, I confirm that this is a trade part of the agreement. And my colleagues will continue to tell you what this agreement is and why it is important for new Ukrainians, for new Ukraine, and for new members of the society, civil activists, and MPs like we are here today. Thank you.
Thank you. I will continue my colleague. My name is Alisa Ruban. I'm the representative of civil society of Ukraine. I'm representing a think tank which deal with EU affairs and with implementation of the association agreement. So I would just like to add that for us, as representatives of civil society, it's a very powerful instrument and a very powerful tool to implement reforms. Because at the moment, can say that I guess that civil society is actually playing a crucial role. And MPs who are present now, the young representatives of new Ukraine, new political elite of Ukraine, are really helpful. But we still have to reform our country, as you know, and the process will take much time. And for that, we need this instrument, because it's, first of all, it's international obligation, and it doesn't matter which kind of government we will have, but which we are working on reforming a lot. This instrument will work. So we really need that to change our country. And I would like to focus a bit on especially economic part, because 80% of this legal document, which is a huge document, and it's really easy to manipulate the facts with that. But we just want to provide you objective information. We came here not to make any kind of propaganda, because we just want to tell you the truth, what this agreement is all about and what it's about for us, people who are working every day on changing the country. So, as I mentioned, 80% of the document is actually the economic part. And we already have a quite strong presence of Dutch business in Ukraine. As you can see on infographics, at the moment, we have more than 300 active Dutch companies in Ukraine working in different spheres. Half of them are actually agriculture and food presence. So for them, first of all, this DCFTA, it's a deep and comprehensive free trade area, which came into force on 1st January this year, is also a very powerful instrument which changes, first of all, the business climate in Ukraine, and foresees reforms in such spheres as antitrust policy, as customs and investments protection. So for them, it's also a very good instrument to change this business climate in Ukraine, as well as it will help Dutch export in Ukraine, because just since the DCFTA came into force, 80% of current Dutch export entered duty-free, and in 10 years, the number will be 98. Ukraine is a big market. It's 45 million of population with a huge potential for investments as well. Probably know that we have a very strong IT development in Ukraine, and it's foreseen that in some 5-10 years, it actually can become the biggest IT hub in Europe. So we need that instrument, first of all, as people who are struggling, came, just to remind you, on Maidan for that agreement. And it's really the choice of Ukrainian nation, choice of Ukrainian people to change our country. So thank you.
Good afternoon to everybody. My name is Maria Zolkina. I am representative of non-governmental, non-profit analytical organization, think tank, which is called Ilko Kucherev Democratic Initiatives Foundation. We are known in Ukraine and abroad, not also for our political analysis, but mainly and in the most cases for independent and reliable public opinion polls. And what is important for us in the light of having the basis of different data on public attitudes, public assessments, and so on, what is important is that one of the issues which unites the, Ukraine as a country is the common demand for concrete reforms, for concrete sectoral reforms. Demand for concrete reforms, for concrete transformation is the demand which unites all the regions of Ukraine, including those which are under the ongoing conflict. And those reforms are actually for during last years are almost the same. Number one is fighting corruption. Number two is reform, sectoral reforms in the field of law enforcement system, in the field of judicial system, in the field of prosecutor's office. And it means that what is the fact which we insist on while assessing our cooperation with the European Union is that all these reforms are absolutely in logic and in line with our obligations in front of the European Union in the framework of in the light of two frameworks. One is a visa liberalization plan, and the second one is association agreement. And the association agreement is really a tool to transform the country in the light of those issues, in the field of those issues which are of the most important demand on the side of public and on the side of the European Union. As we and in this regard, we have to insist that demand for that reform and perceiving the association agreement as a powerful instrument to transform the country, to push forward the authority. It is not only what the society needs actually, but it is what will help expert organizations, non-governmental organizations, both in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine, to push any kind of authorities, any kind of government, any president in Ukraine in order to make concrete changes. For example, while we assess in the framework of our public opinion polls what actors actually inside Ukraine or outside of Ukraine people see as the main driving forces and of reform process. So the best assessments have NGOs in Ukraine, which are seen by people as the main driving force. NGOs and expert organizations is seen as those actors which have positive impact on the transformation process, but only half of 1% people in Ukraine have negative assessment of how NGOs pushes reform process forward. And it means that all those expectations, they are very precise and very concrete oriented on the reform process. And in this regard, those actors which are really influential in this process, they need that instrument in order to push authorities as decision makers, as policy makers, to gain our common our common aim. Just recently, just several days ago, we finished one of our expert opinion polls which united both Ukrainian expert community and experts and analysts which work on EU-Ukraine relations within European Union member states. And what we received, people which look precisely on how EU-Ukraine relations look like, they insist that the main benefits for the European Union in the framework of deepening relations with Ukraine is that it will make Ukraine stable and democratic state, which is actually a kind of high significance as a secure zone in the Eastern Europe. And the second, the most widely or the most often named benefit for the European Union, in opinion, according to opinion of European experts, is that this will bring new business and economic opportunities for European businessmen and for European business community, actually. And I think that the current history of the current actually functioning of the European Union can benefit mainly as from implementation of association agreement with Ukraine, mainly as an example, as the case of transformation power of the European Union. And I think that implementation of visa liberalization plan was already and can already be regarded as the successful example, but the association agreement is a much more successful in terms of perspective, because this is not the European Union to implement any kind of standards or any kind of legislation norms in order to absorb something from outside. It is Ukraine to implement legislation norms, it is Ukraine to implement those standards which are common for the European Union, and this is actually our home task, and we're ready to gain it, and we're ready to absorb all these obligations and to fulfill it in order to be more successful in the Eastern Europe as a state. And what is much more important is that everything is done without actually any official proposals on something more which is than just implementation of association agreement.
Thank you, Masha. Let me just continue our speech about Ukraine. My name is Elena Sotnik. I'm a member of Parliament. I'm also, like Alyona Shkrum, is newcomer to the Parliament. And just before, I want to tell you some messages about the meaning for us of your voting. I would like to tell you my story. Before the Maidan and before the Revolution of Dignity, I used to be a lawyer, rather successful lawyer. I was the youngest partner in law company in Ukraine, and my career was successful, and I had good incomes. But then Revolution of Dignity happened, and I was a lawyer as a volunteer on Maidan. For 6 months, we tried to protect protesters. And then when just shooting happened on Maidan, and we received more than 100 deaths of Heavenly 100, as it named now in Ukraine, I was one of the lawyers of the Heavenly 100 families, and we tried to investigate this case, and we tried to find who really guilty in these deaths. And then it happened early elections, and just my colleagues who knew me very well told me it's a chance for young person to come and to change something, because otherwise you will never find the guilty persons in the deaths, and you will never find this fair trial, you will never find fair prosecution if you don't want to change it by your own. And it was my decision, and I left my career and decided to try to change my country. And I believe that a lot of these persons, these people that you see now and we have in Ukraine, because it was a unique situation of volunteers and civil society activity, I believe that all of them, they want to build new country. We are a very young country, and we are trying to protect our values. We are trying to build new institutions in the principle of rule of law, and we are trying to fight with corrupted inheritance of Soviet Union. And still we need support of more experienced countries, like your country. That's why we really need your yes on this referendum. And I just want to tell you that the meaning about what I think about meaning of association agreement. It is action plan, a plan how to bring Europe to Ukraine. It doesn't mean obvious that Ukraine wants to come to Europe or to be the member of the European Union. We just want to build within these principles to build very strong country. And in this case, we want that other countries of Europe and of the world could proud that they help Ukraine one day to build this strong country. Thank you. Hello, good afternoon. My name is Virginia Adronova, and thank you for inviting us today. I'm International Secretary of the political party Solidarność, Blok Petro Poroshenko, its presidential party, and I've been working in this position for a year. As my colleagues have already mentioned, most of us, all of us, we are quite successful young representatives of Ukraine. And we could be doing some other jobs and just taking care of ourselves and of our families. But we have chosen to take care of our countries. And there are many people of this kind in Ukraine, young representatives of young generation who have made the decision to take care of their country and build a stronger state. Association agreement with the European Union means for us that we can carry out the reforms which are needed to build a strong state. This is why we are sacrificing our own interests for the sake of the interests of the state. Myself, well, I traveled the world. I speak a few foreign languages. I could have been living in many countries of the European Union as somewhere else as well. But I'm living in Ukraine. I'm choosing to live in Ukraine. I'm choosing to build a stronger state. The same counts for my colleagues. We are just like you. We are young generation which wants to have a good state and good conditions for ourselves and for the next generation of Ukraine. And this is why we are here to present ourselves and to ask you to help to build this strong state in Ukraine. This is all about Ukraine being stronger, being a reliable partner for the European Union, and not more. We really hope for your support during the referendum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All of us, we are a little bit distressed because just a couple of hours ago we were witnessing the people fleeing the Brussels airport. We saw some wounded, we saw people crying, we saw emotions, frightened, scared people, and of course it shouldn't be this way anywhere on this planet, and it shouldn't be happening in Europe nowadays. Of course, we're quite sympathetic to those wounded, to those who've been affected some way by this terrible terrorist acts. And again, it makes us think about ourselves, about our country, because for myself, I'm a career diplomat who, after 20 years of serving as the member of Diplomatic Corps of Ukraine, decided during the Revolution of Dignity to withdraw from the government, to quit the government, to start a new career, a new life of civil society activist. For simple reason, I believe in something which I hope is important for Europeans. I believe in human dignity, I believe in human rights, I believe in the rule of law. And there are a lot of people like myself who decided after a long and extensive career in the government to join the civil society to improve our country, because we believe in the strengths and in the wisdom of people. And it was basically the main motive for us to participate in the revolution. And one of the motives to do, which basically brought us to the streets of our cities during the revolution, was the association agreement with the European Union. Why? This agreement is not about the EU membership. It foresees no membership plans or future for Ukraine. It is not about the money, because it provides no perspectives of direct finance from EU to Ukraine. It is not even about the trade for us, because in the short-term perspective, most likely we will lose something, because our industry and economy is not really competitive, and we're looking forward to reform it, to make it not just competitive, but also to suggest ourselves as the new interesting market for Europeans. So for us, it was about the values, about the choice of living in a free country with a free people, surrounded by the free and friendly nations. So we really hope that our wishes and our expectations of the future, which we are really linking with the Agreement on Association, and by the way, we paid for our adherence to those values and to this agreement by the hundreds of the lives of our citizens who died as the result of the police brutality. We hope that those values are equally important to Europeans as well. And in this respect, we really expecting and inviting our good and dear friends all over Europe, not just to support us, but here in Netherlands to come and to vote yes. Because it is not about the economy, it is not about the money. It is about the destiny, the future, and the values. So if you are supporting the democracy, if you believe in the right of self-identification, if you believe in the human rights, please come and support this agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Maybe I didn't indicate in my opening remarks that we have a colleague here, Cynthia Lardner, an American journalist from the magazine for today's Executive Woman, I think, is the word. Do you have some questions maybe to ask for?
I have a comment. It would seem to me that the biggest benefit is that it expands the possibility that the Ukraine will be better able to adhere to rule of law, is there will be less potential for corruption and mismanagement. And it will therefore further democratic principles. We are living in a time, and not only was there the Prime Minister of Russia's statements during the Munich Security Council, but there was a statement from Sergei Lavrov on March 3rd, who is one of Putin's top aides, which indicates there's an intent to destabilize the European Union. And I think the European Union needs to draw close to its allies who share adherence to rule of law and countries that are striving to put rule of law into place. And it isn't so much about the trade, it's about facilitating the growth of a country so that it can keep furthering what you young people have already started. Did I say that succinctly?
The question was about young people, so I would rather provide the opportunity.
It's about supporting in a time of destabilization, and there's a lot of destabilization amongst the EU members as a result of the refugee crisis. There's more talk of withdrawal from the EU, not only by Britain. This is a time for the EU to come together along with the United States. You're not a NATO member. I know that the accession process would be a long process, but you are an alliance of NATO at this time. And this is just one more extension of that. And it offers you the opportunity to further rule law.
Thank you so much for your question. I would agree with you on many, many terms, because you're absolutely right. Ukraine, it came a long way being a young country from the Soviet Union, from a very, very corrupt country, from a country totally dependent on Russia security, on Russia industry, on Russia markets, to a country where we want to build a new young society which stands for the European values. It's not, people died on Maidan not because they wanted to be in the European Union or to be in NATO tomorrow or even in 5 years, but because they died there for some of the common, values and common freedoms, like economic freedom, political freedom, freedom of speech, the ability to be safe in their own country, the ability, to play by the rules, the ability to be judged justly in the courts, the ability to have the common values that we all stand for. And that's why the newcomers to the Ukrainian politics, to Ukrainian government, to Ukrainian civil society, they are still fighting for that. It will not be an easy road, we know that, but this is what for us symbolizes the whole economic part and political part of the association agreement. it's mainly about trade for the Netherlands. It's mainly about trade for the Europeans because they would have access to the new markets. We would be able to provide more investment security for their companies coming to us. We would be able to provide more, justice in our courts and securities for their investments. But yes, you're absolutely right that this is what Europe would gain from us probably. Lower prices, win-win market prices, etc., etc. But what we would gain from this yes in the referendum in the Netherlands is the feeling that, the values we fought for are still there in Europe, and Europe still supports it, and Europe realizes that in our globalized, very difficult, very complicated world, we need to stay together in those common values, and we need, to stand together against all the other values of terrorism, all the other dangers we have in the world right now. Thank you. If you would like to.
Ironically, so it is less about rational motives for us and more about irrational motives. That's because we decided that, and we know it from our history, we used to have a nickname as the breadbasket of Europe. Europe means that we are located in Europe. We are Europeans. And this is our choice to be with those nations with whom we really share some vision of the future. So when we decided that we paid the lives of our citizens for our own decision, to choose our destiny, so it is about our right to choose our own destiny. And of course we will benefit from the agreement in the long term because it provides a clear roadmap of the reforms and transformation of our economy, of our industry and our society, which of course will bring better, more effective government. It will bring us more effective economy, and at the end I'll hope that altogether it will create a new system, less corrupted or maybe without a corruption or at the same level that we have it in Europe or elsewhere in the highly developed democratic countries. So it's a strong combination of different reasons, but at least from my point of view, most of them are highly irrational. So it's not about us calculating how much we will gain after the agreement will be ratified, because we are gaining nothing in terms of money as the result of the implementation of this agreement. But we're gaining a lot as the country which is looking for better future. And it provides us with a clear roadmap how should we achieve our so desired goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you want to add something to your first question?
Yeah, I don't know if you're all familiar with Anne Applebaum.
Yes.
She spoke here last week on this issue. Are you familiar with that? Were you able to watch the video? Okay. So I don't need to repeat what she said, and that is drawing closer to European values and validating the Ukraine for wanting to do so.
Thank you for your interest.
Thank you for giving us this presentation. I think it's a very convincing one. But it's easy for me to say because I'm very much in favor of the association agreement. The problem is that there is part of the Dutch population which is asking some critical questions about the development in your country. And so we have to wait and see what the outcome of the referendum will be. But I think it's very convincing, and I hope that it will attract a lot of attention from the internet when it's put on the internet. Thank you very much for being here. I do wish you a pleasant stay in the Netherlands, of course, and a very fruitful stay, because I do understand that you have a discussion this afternoon or this evening with 2 Christian Democratic members of Parliament here. So I hope your discussions here and your meetings will be very fruitful. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for
so
hosting
much.
us here.